Good morning. My name is Joanna Natasegara, and I'm a producer based here in London. Delighted to be moderating today's session with Violet Du Feng, director and producer of the beautiful film Hidden Letters. Good morning, Violet. How are you?
Good morning, Joanna.
Hello.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I've just remembered that we are, in fact, supposed to describe ourselves. So for our audiences, I am a middle-aged Asian woman in a beige jumper in a white room.
I'm a middle-aged Asian woman in a black t-shirt with a blurred background.
Fantastic. Great. Well, what a thrill to be talking to you today about your beautiful film. And I think I'd just love to start by asking, how did you find this story, or did it find you?
Yeah, so I actually read a novel called Snowflower and a Secret Fan, written by American author Lisa See about 15 years ago. And it was a novel based on this secret language. And I remembering reading this book and feeling completely blown away by the existence of the language, but at the same time feeling really ashamed that as an Asian woman, as a Chinese woman, I knew nothing about it growing up. So fast forwarding, I think to 2010, that was the year that I moved back to China and I got married and had my daughter. And instantly I started to feel the increased overwhelming pressure as a Chinese woman to deal with, all these societal expectations for me as a mother and also as a wife. And I had a sense of confusion also as a filmmaker, a female filmmaker dealing with a very patriarchal film industry still in China. So I was dying to find a space to talk about this gender role and this gender frustration that I had. But at the time, I think in China, gender equality is not something that you can openly talk about. So when my two producers approached me, Mette Montikas from Norway and then Jing Chen from the US to make a film about Nushu, my instant reaction is that if I can tie the history of Nushu with what's going on of women's experiences in China, then that's a film that I want to make.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the journey began.
That's lovely. How had Mette and Jean heard about the language?
It actually started all from Mette's mom, who's Chinese and also from Shanghai. And I think we probably read the same book around the same time. And since then, she has been bugging Mette to make a film about Nushu. So eventually Mette went to Jean and then Jean connected us.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, you tell the story so beautifully, but it's not, I can see as a producer, it must have been difficult to know where to start. How did you approach the topic and how did you find your characters?
Yeah, I know that, I mean, this film is actually really complex. There's a lot of layers. And then during the time that I researched, I know a couple of things. One is that I wanted to tell the story through cinema verite, really following the youngest generation of women who is trying to revive Nushu, but at the same time is navigating their own personal life and career life in the patriarchal society. And that's very much what I was struggling with. So finding a way to build that trust and intimate access with the character, I know is absolutely the most important thing. And to follow them at a crossroad at their life, and then to really be on the journey with them to see through their transformation with their relationship to Nushu is absolutely important to me. And I also know that, with a film like this, it's really important to cast the backdrop of where the society is at. And to me is to find a way through the lens of Nushu to show the audience basically where the bigger landscape of gender perceptions are in China, and where does that come from? I mean, to me, it's very complex that we sit in a society that's affected by the ingrained, thousands of years of tradition and cultural, and also the systematic structure of where we are that's still very patriarchal, and also coming from men's perception about women and how women see ourselves. So like all these layers, I need to find a way to bring all those together. So that's why that, the first time I went to the villages to scout about the story of Nushu, I instantly realized the importance of how the commercialization of the language will play in a role in the film and why that needs to be. So anyway, so I think that it's having all these layers coming together is probably the most difficult challenge throughout the making.
Yeah, I mean, you thread it beautifully, and I think the word complex is very real. You know, the film in many ways, I think, plays like a narrative film, and your use of verite is a real kind of testament to that. Obviously, there's a part of that because you got very close to the characters, and your access is wonderful. How did you build those relationships of trust with the three women in the film?
Well, because from the very beginning, I was very transparent with them why I'm making this film. And they understand that, you know, it is a film about Nushu, but it's actually a film about them because I'm very much one of them. And I also really was hoping to make this film and then also try to find answers for myself as a filmmaker and also as a mother, as a woman, and all of those things. And so like, we're very much in this together, and the transparency of the motivation of me making a film plays a huge role of why the characters really trusted our relationship. Yeah, and I think that's I also knew from the beginning that I really wanted to cast one girl from the rural areas and one girl from the city, because the challenges of women that they're facing from these two different parts of the country is very different. So yeah, so when I met Wu Xin and I understood that she's at this traumatic you know, point where she just got divorced, you know, that was the moment that I knew that I want to start to follow her, because, you know, from then on, I know she will have a different kind of relationship with Nushu. And that's whatever that means. That's something that I'm really interested to capture and then be on the journey with her. And through her, I met Simu, who actually learned Nushu from her in the city. And, you know, to me that she, first of all, is in the relationship. And secondly, she's probably one of the only person that I've met among my casting who is in Nushu out of pure passion for the secret language, and also out of the pure intention that she really was trying to hope to have the dialogue with the secret language so that she can find her own gender identity. And to me, that's like so important. And also she is in this amazing group of like 20 something female artists that they have this annual exhibitions to use art to talk about their gender roles and their gender challenges. So all of this made me, yeah, instantly after the first conversation, we were just like, let's do it.
Now, you know, I will say men don't come off well in this film. Do you think that's, you know, it was a surprise to me. I mean, you know, in many ways, the film is very much about China, but there are also so many things that are universal and felt, you know, very recognizable to me, you know, in British society. The level of patriarchy, the pressure, the additional pressure of kind of working women and motherhood is all very, very universal. But tell me, does this feel, do you think, representative of, you know, most male-female relationships in China? Or
I think that's how I felt when I was living there for the 7 years. And I was also shocked myself of like how we're still living in this kind of like confinement in a lot of ways. And I said that, you know, those scenes that when we see men's reactions to Nushu, and more importantly to women, that, you know, it's very natural settings that we just simply had the camera there. Yeah, I think that, I mean, I honestly, we actually tried to neutralize, you know, especially through Simu's fiance's character a bit, especially, you know, like having the scenes about, you know, at you know, the lunch scene when he took Simu back to his hometown and have the lunch with his family, and then talking about the role of him as a boy, that his responsibility to take care of the family. I mean, there's those things that we intentionally really wanted to have it in a film so that people have a sense that, men are also confined in their role and their, societal expectations on them also. So it's not like, men's fault or woman's fault in this regard, but like we're all trapped in our, roles in these kind of settings. So I think that's more important for us to kind of show. And also I think that China is a society where, interestingly, when I've been, showing this film in many festivals, and a lot of audience came to me and said that, wow, we had the impression that Chinese woman is actually really, like, sophisticated and also well educated and then really accomplished in a lot of sense. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. And we have done tremendous work, on our being and all of that. But, the problem is that I think men's expectations hasn't changed that much. So that created a huge gap between these two genders. And then how do we help with that? So I'm really hoping that this film can help both men and women to reflect on our roles and finding a way to bridge that gap.
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple axes in this film, aren't there? There's the gender axis, but there's also modernity and, history. There's, commercialization and community. Tell me, how did you navigate telling all of that successfully in one film?
By digging deep into the characters emotionally. And I truly believe that the deeper that we can get into the character, the deeper we can get into a personal story, and all these complexities will just come out by itself, and then people can interpret different ways. And then that's, I think, my approach. And then also, I don't think that I have answers to all these questions, but only by being authentically, honestly with my characters throughout their emotional journey is my way to help people to connect to them in a way that, and all these questions and all these reflections will be, coming out in different kind of ways from the audience.
I mean, your own approach to the film is incredibly artistic. You're clearly a very cinematic filmmaker. Was that very intentional, or is it just instinctive?
I never really saw myself as a very I came from a journalism background. So to me, to have a way to communicate with the audience in a true, authentic way is the most important thing to me. But I think the kind of style of this film, kind of come on naturally by itself because of what Nushu is. It's poetry. It has to be lyrical in certain sense. And, there's so many unspeakable kind of natures of why this language exists, and then how does this woman communicate. And I think that using this artistic approach and cinematic approach, or whatever we call it, is only fitting in this film. And I think that, like the film itself has to flow like a poetry, and which is kind of like why I think shows true respect to the legacy of what these women created.
Yeah, I certainly think you achieved that. Have you shown it to the three women, and what did they think of?
So we are yes, I have had very in-depth communications with these women about what got into the film and what I decided not to be edited into the film, and then the choices of what I made and then why I made those has been communicated very clearly with my characters. And I think that's super important, because that, they have been in this journey with me, and trust, us with all they have, basically. And then the consequence, especially to have subjects in documentaries and to be seen in China eventually, is something that we had to be super, super careful about. So I think that kind of conversation that I had with the characters is really important. And I think that they also really trust the outcome of how this film plays out.
And so will you be showing the film in China?
We're working on it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also think there's a huge story beat about commercialization, and obviously it's a fascinating one, specifically around Nushu, but it seems to speak to a broader kind of context of Chinese society right now. Again, talk to me about that. Was that intentional, or did it just flow from what you saw in the lens?
Yeah, it's absolutely intentional. I think there are so many layers about why I think that the importance of these scenes to be in the film. I mean, first of all, my feeling of when I moved back to China of how the society changes from the time that when I was born and raised in China, very much in a time that's more communist. And then there's one thing that the Communist Party really promoted was gender equality. And my mom was the first generation medical staff in the family, and just like Simu's mom. So I instantly, as soon as I met Simu's mom, I knew that where she come from. And, like that generation of women took tremendous pride in their profession. And back then, I think in China, the participation rate of women in politics and labor were the highest among the world.
Wow.
And then fast forward to where when I became a mother, and like one of the most significant change was that all the state provided free childcare service was taken away. So like, and then the gender income gap becomes like so big that because of that, a lot of women has to be forced in a role back into the family. And I just felt like, how capitalism really plays a significant role in changing gender equality. And that's not just China, that's everywhere. And now that, like everything is commercialized, and now that the last product that women created, intentionally trying to carve out a space for themselves is being commercialized too. There's so much irony in this, and then there's so much parallel about how Nushu being capitalized and how the society being capitalized and how women are trapped in these roles because of that. So I think there's one layer of that I'm really hoping that through these scenes that will help people to provoke their thoughts around those lines. And the other thing is that I really was hoping to use these scenes to really show men's reaction towards Nushu, and more importantly towards women. And the only difference is that we have a camera there. We weren't trying to enforce these men's behavior to be like this, but they feel very comfortable like how they behave, and then trying to co-opt and then taking over what woman has created for themselves. So I think that those are things along the line that why I think is really important to build a storyline about the commercialization of Nushu, and how my characters are stuck in these roles as well.
What do you recognize? I mean, I know you now live in the US, and women's rights are not a hot topic in the US. What do you recognize where you're living now, and what are the differences from China?
I think that, like it's global. It's global. It's not just US. It's what's happening in Iran right now. It's in China. It's in Ukraine. It's in Afghanistan. That, however much we have changed, it seems like, we're in certain ways still at the same place. And if we don't come together, I think that keep pushing the narrative forward, and it's just very easy that things can go backwards, and that's what China is. I think as certain ways it's like that, and also what's happening in the US, it's also like that. Yeah, I think that that's what actually really inspired me of what these women created in Nushu. That I often think that way, during the feudal society, that they're in this like unbearable condition at the bottom of the society, and there's no way for them to even imagine to change any bit of what the system is like, or what the dominant social structure is like. But instead they find their own way by coming together, by creating a space to share their vulnerabilities, to share their authentic beings, and to also share their resilience and find strength and power by coming together. And that's like extraordinary. And in the end, I have to mention that in the end, over the years, that men even show more respect to women because they understand the existence of this language. So any woman who knew how to practice Nushu were being called gentle woman as a term in these villages, and even by men. So I thought that's like so incredible, and how that has a relevance today, even that the importance of that legacy to be carried on, of how we should just, like we should just all come together and then, share our vulnerabilities and then build our strengths, and by speaking up together. Yeah.
I mean, on that note, I'd love to know, to ask you about the impact campaign for this film, because, I've always been really attracted and impressed by the impact work that you do. Do you have plans for this? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, so I have been so passionate about this film because I know that it's, Nushu just an entry point to look at into, where we are as Chinese women, but also where we are as women in general. And it's not just a woman about Chinese women. It's not a film just about Chinese women. It's a film about, all of us. So I'm really hoping by honoring the legacy of Nushu, we can really elevate all women who are trying to use different kind of art to share their experiences, to express themselves in a daring way that they otherwise could not. So we have started this 10-episode Instagram live series, and it happens every month. Just follow us on Instagram, and every episode we feature one female artist who is using their different kind of art forms to express their true beings and to express their challenges in different kind of ways of their gender identities. And along with the Instagram live series, we have also just opened our call for all women to submit to us of their artwork that share their, identity and share their women's experiences. And it's on our website at hiddenlettersfilm.com. And on that, there's a tab called Engage. And under that, there's a tab called Virtual Gallery. So it takes probably only 10 minutes to submit to us, but like any woman from any kind of cultural, socioeconomic background can submit to us. And at the end of the process, we're going to have cash winners. And also we'll have a selection of women's work and then build it into our virtual gallery. And that will be like April next year. And I think for any audience, they can just use their phone and then go into our virtual gallery, and it will be like an AI kind of design. And it's like how you walk into a museum is how you will be walking into a virtual gallery. And then on the walls, you will see these women's works, and then also hear the stories of how they share their experiences. And we're really hoping to have this virtual gallery to travel around the world, and in that way to create our own space of sisterhood, and by speaking it up together, expressing ourselves together. And yeah, and then hopefully through that, we're also going to create our own power and strengths and helping to move forward the narrative.
Well, Violet, you certainly showed us your true self with this film. Thank you so much. I think audiences will agree. It's a stunning film. I also know it's a move from producing to directing, for you. So really congratulations, and can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you so much.